The city was alive that morning, horns blaring, shoes clicking against pavement, and the hum of conversations blending into a restless soundtrack. But in the middle of that restless motion stood someone who did not belong to its rhythm, an old woman, frail, small, trembling. Her gray coat hung loose over her thin frame, her scarf unevenly tied as if she'd forgotten how to finish the knot. She clutched a worn handbag against her chest, eyes darting in every direction, searching, lost, overwhelmed. People streamed around her, barely noticing. A businessman, phone pressed to his ear, brushed past so close he nearly knocked her shoulder. A mother, tugging her child along, muttered, "Come on, we're late." Even a group of teenagers walked by laughing, their eyes flicking toward her for only a second before turning back to their own world. No one stopped. The woman took a step forward, then froze. Her lips moved, whispering words no one cared enough to hear. She glanced up at the towering buildings as if they were strangers looming over her. Her eyes watered, not just from the wind, but from something deeper, the quiet terror of realizing she had no idea where she was, or how to get home. Still, the crowd flowed, a tide of indifference. Minutes passed. Every second stretched into something heavier. She tried again, timidly raising her hand toward a passerby. "Excuse me, please." The young man didn't even break stride. The silence around her grew louder than the city noise. It was the silence of being unseen, forgotten. She shifted her weight, clutching her bag tighter. Her knees shook as she whispered, "I just need help." But no one listened. The camera of our imagination pulls back, revealing the river of people sweeping by, her faces blank, eyes fixed on screens, hearts locked away behind schedules and distractions. She was a human being, yet invisible. The old woman tried to move, but her legs faltered. She gripped the wall of a shop for balance, her breathing shallow. For a moment, it looked like she might collapse. A man in a suit noticed. He slowed down, looked right at her, and then kept walking. That was the world around her. That was the choice everyone made, to keep walking. Her gaze followed the crowd with quiet desperation, almost pleading without words. Will no one see me? Will no one care? And just when the loneliness seemed unbearable, the story shifted, because in that same crowd, just a few steps away, someone did see her. Not a businessman, not a store clerk, not a rushing mother, a teenager, young, sharp-eyed, and still enough in spirit to notice what no one else did. His name was Malik. And while the world walked past her, he stopped. In the endless blur of the city, one pair of eyes finally broke free from the rush. Malik, 17, a backpack slung across his shoulder, headphones around his neck, sneakers worn from too many miles on cracked sidewalks. He wasn't supposed to notice her, not when everyone else had already decided she didn't matter. But he did. Malik slowed his pace, his brow furrowing. The old woman's hand trembled as it clung to the wall. Her lips moved, barely forming words, eyes searching the crowd with desperate confusion. Something inside him whispered, "Don't look away." The people behind him grumbled when he stopped. A man brushed past with a huff, muttering, "Kids these days." But Malik didn't move. His chest tightened. He had seen plenty of people ignored before: homeless men on corners, women begging for change outside grocery stores, but this felt different. This woman looked like someone's grandmother, and she was alone. Malik pulled his headphones down, stuffed them in his pocket, and stepped closer. "Ma'am." His voice was soft, uncertain at first. "Are you okay?" The old woman's head turned slowly, eyes cloudy with confusion. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her lips trembled. Then, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she whispered, I don't know where I am." The words cut through Malik. He swallowed hard, glancing at the crowd. Dozens of eyes could see this if they wanted to. Dozens of hearts could care. But none of them stopped. Only him. Malik shifted, unsure what to do next. He was just a teenager. What if she didn't trust him? What if others thought he was bothering her? But then he noticed her hands. They weren't just trembling, they were reaching, ever so slightly, as if hoping someone would take them. Malik exhaled, steadying himself. He took one careful step closer. "It's okay," he said, gentler this time. "I'll help you. You don't have to be scared." The woman's watery eyes fixed on him, and though she still looked lost, her shoulders eased just a little, as if the mere act of being seen, of being spoken to kindly, gave her a fragile piece of comfort. Around them, the city didn't slow down. People still rushed past, casting glances that lingered too long on Malik. Whispers floated behind him, the kind that made his skin prickle. But he stayed. In that moment, Malik understood something simple yet powerful. Sometimes courage isn't about grand gestures. It's about standing still when everyone else walks away. He reached out his hand. "Let's figure this out together," he said softly. And with that single choice, the quiet story of a boy and a forgotten woman began to weave itself into something no one on that street could have imagined. Because this was only the beginning, and the hardest part was yet to come. Her lips parted, but the words came out broken. I can't. I don't know where I am." Malik leaned in closer, careful not to startle her. The tremor in her voice was sharper than the chill in the air. Her eyes flicked around the street, as if the buildings themselves had shifted into a maze that refused to let her out. he spoke gently. It's okay, ma'am. Just take your time. Do you remember your street? Your house? Her fingers gripped the strap of her handbag so tight her knuckles whitened. Home, she whispered. I can't find my home. The words hit Malik like a weight in his chest. He'd seen people lost before, but never like this. This wasn't just confusion, this was fear wrapped in fragility. The crowd kept moving. Cars honked. Shoes tapped past. To them, it was just another scene to avoid eye contact with. But to Malik, it was impossible to ignore. She pressed her palm to her temple, as if forcing her memory to surface. My son, he was waiting for me. Or maybe, her voice drifted. Then, softer, I don't know anymore. Malik's throat tightened. He'd heard stories about dementia, but seeing it unfold right in front of him it felt different, like watching a mind unravel in slow motion. He glanced at the strangers passing by. A woman in a red coat actually paused for a second, stared at them, then shook her head and kept going. Not one person asked if they needed help. Malik shifted his backpack nervously. He was just a kid. What was he supposed to do? He didn't know her address, her name, her family, and yet, he couldn't walk away. He crouched slightly so his eyes met hers. Ma'am, do you know your name? Can you tell me that? Her lips trembled. For a long aching pause, nothing came. Then finally, Eleanor. Okay, that's good. Eleanor, Malik repeated, trying to anchor her in the moment. My name's Malik. You're safe with me. I promise. Her gaze softened, though the fear lingered just beneath. She held on to his words as if they were a fragile rope dangling over a storm. And still, no one else stopped. The city had made its choice, to look away, to let her vanish into the blur. But Malik had made his in that instant. It no longer mattered that he was only 17, or that strangers were staring. He knew he couldn't leave Eleanor alone. The question was no longer if he would help, it was how, and that decision would lead him into challenges he never expected. For a split second, Malik thought about leaving. He could tell himself it wasn't his problem, that someone older, someone stronger, someone with authority would step in. But as he looked at Eleanor's trembling frame, her fragile eyes searching for an anchor, he knew deep down, nobody else was coming. It was him, or no one. Malik's palms were clammy as he shifted on his feet. His friends would probably tell him not to get involved. His mom would worry about the dangers. And already, he could feel the eyes of strangers digging into him. Still, he bent down slightly and said, Eleanor, I'll help you. You're not alone anymore. Her lips quivered, the words escaping in a whisper. You will. Yes, Malik nodded, steadying his voice. I'll get you home. He stretched out his hand. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Would she trust him? Would she pull away? Then, with the slow grace of someone terrified yet desperate for safety, Eleanor placed her thin, wrinkled hand into his. Her grip was weak, but the gesture was powerful. It was a covenant of trust between a lost old woman and a boy the world had already judged out. The whispers started almost instantly. A man in a gray coat muttered to his companion, not quietly enough, what's he doing with her? A woman passing by frowned, clutching her purse tighter. Her eyes lingered on Malik longer than on Eleanor. Malik felt it, every stare, every unspoken question, every suspicion that clung to him not because of what he did but because of who he was. He straightened his shoulders, fighting the urge to let go. Ignore them, he told himself. She needs you. Eleanor's voice broke the tension. I don't remember where it is. My house, I just know. It's near a garden, with flowers. Malik squeezed her hand lightly. Okay, that's a start. We'll figure it out, together. But even as he spoke, the doubt in the crowd grew heavier. A shopkeeper leaned halfway out his door, arms crossed, watching them too closely. A mother pulled her daughter away, whispering something under her breath. Malik's chest tightened. He wasn't blind to it. He knew the stereotypes, the headlines, the assumptions people made about teens who looked like him. And now here he was walking hand in hand with a fragile white woman who looked like she could collapse. At any moment, he could feel the narrative writing itself in other people's heads. And none of those versions painted him as the hero. But he didn't let go. He kept his head forward, his pace steady, and whispered to Eleanor, don't worry, I'm not letting you go until you're safe. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles. Thank you, my angel. The word stopped him cold. Angel, nobody had ever called him that before, and for the first time in that long morning, Malik felt that maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Still, deep down, he knew this was only the beginning, because while he had chosen kindness, the world around him wasn't finished testing him yet, and the next test would come sooner than he thought. The city stretched ahead like a gauntlet. Malik held Eleanor's hand gently, guiding her step by step along the sidewalk. To him, it was a simple act of care. To her, it was lifeline. But to everyone else watching, it became something else entirely. Eyes followed them. Some curious, some suspicious, a few openly hostile. Malik felt that the weight of judgment pressing against his back with every step. He'd grown up knowing how quickly people could misread him. Too young, too black, too out of place. And now, walking hand in hand with a frail old woman, he could almost hear the whispers forming in their heads. Eleanor looked up at him, her voice trembling. Do you know the way? Malik forced a steady smile. Not yet, but we'll find it. Don't worry. Her grip tightened, and for a moment, that was enough to silence his doubt. But the city had other plans. They passed a cafe, its windows crowded with morning customers. A man sipping coffee pointed, leaning toward his friend. Look at that kid, he said under his breath, though loud enough for Malik to hear. Malik's chest burned. He kept walking. Next came a woman on her phone, slowing her pace to watch. Her eyes narrowed, tracing Eleanor's fragile steps, then cutting back to Malik, her lips pressed tight, as if holding back a warning. Eleanor faltered, her knees buckling slightly. Malik steadied her, whispering, I've got you. You're okay. But to the woman on her phone, the scene didn't look like protection. It looked like suspicion. And suspicion has a way of spreading. By the time Malik led Eleanor past the corner store, the tension finally cracked. The store clerk, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and folded arms, stepped out onto the sidewalk. He stared at Malik, then at Eleanor, then back again. The clerk barked, What's going on here? Eleanor flinched at the sudden voice. Malik froze, his stomach knotting. I'm just helping her, he said quickly. She's lost. The clerk's eyes narrowed. Doesn't look like she knows you. Malik's pulse quickened. He glanced at Eleanor, who only looked more confused under the pressure. She whispered faintly, Home, flowers. But the words made no sense to the man glaring at them. The clerk took a step closer. Lady, is this boy bothering you? Malik's heart slammed against his ribs. This was exactly what he'd feared. One misunderstanding, and the story could flip against him. He opened his mouth, but Eleanor beat him to it, her voice fragile, unsure. He's helping me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't strong, but it was enough to make the clerk pause. Malik swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. She's lost. I'm trying to get her home safe. That's it. The clerk looked between them, still unconvinced. Then, with a huff, he muttered, You'd better not be lying, before retreating back into his shop. Malik exhaled slowly, realizing only then that his hands were shaking. The whole encounter left Eleanor even more fragile, her trust clinging desperately to his promise. He squeezed her hand gently. It's okay, Eleanor. Don't listen to them. We'll keep going. But in his gut, Malik knew this wasn't the last time they'd be questioned. Every block ahead was another chance for someone to doubt him, to misread him, to turn his kindness into suspicion. And sooner than he realized, one of those doubts would come with a badge. The sharp cry of a siren shattered the tense silence. Malik froze, his hand still holding the old woman's trembling arm. Blue and red lights reflected against the store windows, washing his face in alternating flashes of color. A police cruiser pulled up, tires screeching as the crowd stepped back, suddenly eager to watch. The door swung open, and an officer stepped out, hand hovering near his belt. What's going on here? His tone carried authority, but beneath it lurked suspicion. Malik's heart pounded. He swallowed, forcing his voice to steady. I'm helping her. She's lost. She doesn't know how to get home. But the officer's gaze slid past Malik's words and locked on the old woman. Her eyes darted nervously, clouded with confusion. To a stranger, it could look like fear. The store clerk, the one who had made the call, stepped forward eagerly. Officer, I saw him dragging her along the street. She looked terrified. You should check his pockets. Who knows what he's up to? The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others frowned, unconvinced. Malik's palms began to sweat. He lifted his hands slightly, open, pleading. No, it's not like that. Ask her. Please just ask her. The officer crouched down, lowering his voice to the old woman. Ma'am, do you know this young man? Do you feel safe with him? She blinked, her lips parting. For a painful pause, no sound came. Then her words stumbled out. I don't know. Her fragile voice cracked. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The officer's hand edged closer to his cuffs. Malik's chest tightened like a vice. Please, I found her wandering near the park. She didn't even know her name at first. I was trying to get her home. That's all. But the more he explained, the more his words felt like they dissolved in the air. Every pair of eyes weighed him down with judgment. Every silence threatened to twist into condemnation. The old woman looked between them, all her brow furrowed, her hands trembling. For a terrifying heartbeat, Malik saw it in her eyes. She didn't recognize him. The officer straightened, his tone sharpening. Son, I'm gonna need you to step back. Malik's voice cracked with desperation. I can't leave her like this. She needs someone. Please. Then, in the chaos, a flicker of clarity broke through the fog clouding the woman's gaze. She turned her head slowly, studying Malik. Her lips trembled. And then, her voice rose above the whispers. He's my angel, she whispered. Her fingers clutched his hand tighter, as if anchoring herself. Louder now. Steadier. He's my guardian angel. The crowd fell silent. Even the officer's stern expression faltered. Softening as he looked from her to Malik, the old woman held on, as though letting go would mean losing the only piece of safety she remembered. Malik blinked back tears he hadn't realized were building. Relief washed over him, but the sting of everything he had just endured still lingered. The officer cleared his throat, backing off just slightly. All right, let's make sure she gets home safe. The tension loosened, but not completely. The eyes around him still carried weight, some embarrassed, others stubbornly doubtful. Malik straightened his shoulders, holding the woman's hand firmly. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more difficult. And as the officer gestured for them to walk ahead, Malik realized the road home would not just test his patience, it would test his very strength. The flashing lights faded into the distance, but the weight of what just happened still clung to the air. Malik held the old woman's hand, steadying her as they stepped away from the crowd. His heart was still racing, but now there was no turning back. If he walked away, she'd be swallowed by confusion once more. He couldn't let that happen. He took a slow breath. "Ma'am," he said gently, bending so his eyes met hers. "Can you tell me anything about where you live? A street name? A building?" Her gaze wavered. At first, silence. Then, a word slipped out. Fragile, almost broken. "Magnolia." Malik frowned. Was it a flower, a memory, or maybe a street? He clung to it like a clue in a mystery. Magnolia. Okay, that's good. Magnolia, what? Magnolia Avenue. Magnolia Lane. She shook her head, lost again. Then, with sudden clarity, she whispered, "The shop. The flower shop. I used to go there every Sunday." Malik's mind sparked. "A flower shop." He repeated it softly, almost like anchoring her memory. "A flower shop. That's something we can work with." As they walked, he asked careful questions, giving her time, never rushing. Sometimes her answers made sense. Sometimes they slipped into fragments of the past. "My boy, he loved tulips," she said, smiling faintly. A minute later, her face clouded, and she whispered, "Where is he? He should have come for me." Malik's throat tightened. He didn't know her son, but he could hear the ache in her voice. He squeezed her hand. "We'll find him. Don't worry. I'll help you." The city around them bustled, unaware of the quiet struggle unfolding on its sidewalks. People streamed past, some curious, others indifferent, but Malik stayed focused on her. Every detail she offered was another piece of a puzzle. At one corner, she pointed vaguely toward a row of old buildings. "There, it smells like roses there." But when they approached, the scent was only from a bakery. She frowned, confused. Malik reassured her gently. "It's okay. We'll keep looking. We're closer than we were before." The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the pavement. Malik's legs ached, but he kept his pace steady. He couldn't let her see his doubt. She needed strength, not hesitation. Then another clue. She murmured a name. "Daniel, my Daniel." Malik leaned closer. "Is that your son, Daniel?" Her face brightened for a flicker of a moment. "Yes, Daniel, my boy. He always brings me lilies." Malik stored it away. Magnolia, flower shop. Daniel, slowly, a map began forming in his mind. Maybe he could ask around. Maybe someone would know. As they turned another corner, she stumbled. Malik caught her quickly. She looked at him, her cloudy eyes softening. "You're kind," she whispered. "Most people, they don't see me anymore." The words hit Malik like a stone. He thought of all the people who had walked past her earlier, and he realized this wasn't just about finding her home. It was about giving her back her dignity, even if only for tonight. He nodded, steadying her once more. "I see you," he said quietly. They continued their slow march, Malik piecing her memories together like fragile glass. And with each step, the bond between them deepened. She trusted him, even when her mind betrayed her. He carried that trust like a sacred weight. Finally, as the street lamps flickered on, she tugged his arm and whispered, almost with certainty, "Home. It's near the church with the bell tower." Malik's eyes lifted, scanning the skyline. And there it was, rising in the distance, a bell tower silhouetted against the evening sky. Hope sparked inside him. Maybe, just maybe, they were close. And as they turned toward it, Malik felt a new determination burning in his chest. The search wasn't over, but the path forward was clearer than ever before. The night had grown heavy, the kind of quiet where every footstep echoed louder than it should. Malik's shoes were worn from the miles he'd walked, but he refused to stop. The old woman leaned on him, her hand trembling against his arm, her voice murmuring fragments of a home that still felt just out of reach. White fence, roses by the porch. "And Daniel," she whispered. Malik nodded, scanning the row of houses ahead. His chest tightened with both exhaustion and hope. Could this finally be it, or just another dead end? They turned a corner, and there it was, a modest house with chipped paint, a small garden out front, and roses blooming faintly in the moonlight. A white fence framed it like a memory brought back to life. Malik's breath caught. This was the closest match yet. He helped her up the steps slowly, each one creaking beneath their weight. At the door, she hesitated, her eyes darting with confusion. Malik swallowed hard and knocked. For a moment, silence. Then the sound of locks turning. The door opened, and a man stood there, mid-30s, eyes weary, hair unkempt, as though sleep had been hard to come by. His gaze fell on the old woman first, and his entire body froze. "Mom?" His voice cracked like glass. The woman blinked at him, recognition flickering through her cloudy eyes. "Daniel," she breathed, her lips trembling. In an instant, the man lunged forward, wrapping his arms around her, his face buried in her shoulder as he sobbed. I thought I lost you forever." Malik stepped back slightly, giving them space, but the sight tightened his throat. Hours of doubt, suspicion, and stares suddenly. It was all worth it. Daniel finally pulled away just enough to look at Malik. His eyes, red with tears, widened as he realized what had happened. You brought her home. Malik hesitated, unsure what to say. She was lost, he said quietly. I just couldn't leave her. For a moment, Daniel just stared. Then, before Malik could react, he grabbed him in a hug as fierce as the one he'd given his mother. Thank you. You don't know what this means. You don't know what you've done for me. Malik stiffened. At first he wasn't used to strangers clinging to him like that, but then he felt the weight of the man's gratitude, raw and unguarded, and slowly patted his back. The old woman's eyes softened, her confusion easing for a rare moment of clarity. She reached for Malik's hand. See, she whispered, smiling faintly. My angel. Tears pricked Malik's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He wasn't used to being called that. Most people called him other names, names that stung. But in this moment, standing at the doorway of a house lit by reunion and relief, he felt something shift deep inside. Daniel's grip tightened on his mother's shoulders as he guided her gently inside. But he turned to Malik once more. Please, come in. You deserve to be part of this moment. Malik hesitated on the porch, glancing back at the quiet street, the path he'd taken filled with judgmental eyes and whispered doubts. Stepping inside meant more than crossing a threshold. It meant accepting a place he wasn't sure he belonged. And yet, the warmth spilling out from that doorway was undeniable. Malik drew in a steady breath, then followed them inside, unaware that what awaited him beyond that door would change his life just as much as theirs. Sometimes the most powerful moments don't happen in silence. They happen when silence finally breaks. Malik stood just inside the doorway, the old woman resting in her son's arms. Relief filled the room like sunlight after a storm. But outside, neighbors had begun to gather. Curious eyes peered from porches and windows, drawn by the commotion of reunion and tears. For a long moment, no one spoke. It was as if the world held its breath, watching. Then Daniel, the son, turned to Malik. His voice trembled, thick with emotion. You could have walked past her, just like everyone else. But you didn't. You gave me back my mother. The words struck like thunder in the quiet street. People shifted uncomfortably, realizing he was right. They remembered walking past the frail woman earlier. Too busy or too blind to see her pain. Now, the truth pressed against them like a mirror they couldn't escape. Daniel stepped onto the porch, pulling his mother close. His arm lifted, pointing to Malik. This young man did what no one else would. He chose compassion when the rest of us chose convenience. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her chest, guilt washing over her face. A man lowered his gaze to the ground, ashamed. For the first time that day, Malik wasn't invisible. Every eye was on him. The old woman reached out, her frail hand finding Malik's again. Her voice was fragile, but it carried. My angel, she repeated, looking at him with a clarity that silenced every doubt. Gasps rose. Tears glistened in strangers' eyes. A boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and asked softly, why didn't we help her? Mom. The mother's lips quivered, no answer forming. Daniel tightened his grip on Malik's shoulder. The courage it takes to stand up when everyone else turns away, that's rare. That's what real strength looks like. His words rang across the street. Undeniable. And then, slowly, the silence broke. A voice from the crowd called out, thank you, son. Another added, God bless you. Hands began to clap, hesitant at first, then louder, fuller, until the entire street echoed with applause. Malik froze, overwhelmed. He had never expected gratitude. He had only wanted to do what was right. Now, the very people who once judged him were standing to honor him. For the first time, the weight he carried, the suspicion, the stares, the whispered doubts felt a little lighter, because in that moment, the world finally saw him. The old woman leaned her head against her son's shoulder, her smile faint but peaceful. Daniel pulled Malik into the light of the porch, no longer just a stranger who helped, but part of a story that would never be forgotten. And as the applause faded into the night, Malik's heart pounded with a quiet certainty. Sometimes, one choice is enough to wake an entire street. But what he didn't yet know was that his act of compassion would echo even further, beyond this night, beyond this neighborhood, changing not just her life, but his as well. Sometimes, it's not the world that needs to change first. Sometimes, it's us. Malik walked away from that porch long after the crowd had faded, his mind replaying every moment. The trembling hand he had held, the suspicious eyes that had followed him, the applause that broke the silence, and finally, the way she had looked at him, calling him her angel. He never thought a single choice could weigh so much. Yet, somehow, it had lifted him higher. As he walked through the quiet streets, he thought about the beginning of that day. He had been just another teenager, invisible in the eyes of a city that often judged him before it knew him. But now, something had shifted. He whispered to himself, almost as if testing the thought aloud. One choice. That's all it took. It wasn't grand. It wasn't planned. It was simply stopping when everyone else kept walking. And that was the truth hitting him harder than anything, the realization that kindness doesn't need permission. Compassion doesn't check the color of your skin, your age, or your status. It only asks, will you act? Malik smiled faintly, though his eyes burned with the weight of the lesson. The old woman had been lost, but in helping her, he had found something of his own. A strength he didn't know he carried. A voice he didn't know people would finally hear. He imagined how different the night would have been if he had turned away like everyone else. The thought chilled him, but then he realized it wasn't too late for others to make a different choice tomorrow, because that was the true ripple effect of kindness. It doesn't end with the person you help, it spreads, reshaping the hearts of everyone who witnessed it, even those who once stayed silent. The memory of the little boy's voice echoed in his head. Why didn't we help her, Mom? Maybe that child would grow up and remember. Maybe he'd stop for someone one day. Maybe Malik's single choice would become many choices, carried on in lives he'd never meet. He paused under a streetlight, tilting his head back to the dark sky. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel overlooked. He felt seen, and not just seen by others, but by himself. As his footsteps carried him home, he whispered words that weren't meant for anyone else. Words that wrapped around him like armor. Kindness is never wasted. Never. And with that truth burning inside him, Malik understood. He hadn't just changed the course of one woman's day. He had changed his own life. And perhaps, in some small way, his community's too. Because sometimes, one act of compassion is all it takes to rewrite a story the world thought it already knew.